Hi, Shalom from Jerusalem. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Levi Chazan. I'm coming to you from Yeshivat Rayon Yehudi here in Jerusalem. Parsha Shavua. This week's parsha, vayigash, tells us about Joseph revealing himself before his brothers, and the family finally, after all of these long years, coming back together. And of course, the good news was delivered over to Jacob. And here, Jacob, who has been mourning for over 22 years over his son, presumably thinking that he was dead, here's the good news that Joseph is alive and well and the governor in Egypt. What could be greater than that? And he sends the chariots, he sends foods in order to bring Jacob and the family down to old Egypt land. Sounds like a great plan, but still, we find a fact that's just unbelievable. After all of these years of mourning, of crying out, where is Joseph? Jacob, the mighty one of Israel, cannot lift himself up and leave the land of Eretz Yisrael. He says to himself, how could I leave the land where the Shekhinah, the divine presence, dwells, and go to a land that's impure, Egypt? How is it possible that I could leave this land? As our rabbis teach us, that whoever lives and dwells in the land of Eretz Yisrael, it is as if God is amongst them. And whoever lives outside the land of Eretz Yisrael, it is as if he worships idols, as if God's presence, so to speak, is not there outside the land of Eretz Yisrael. And Jacob can't pick himself up in spite of the fact that he has not seen his son, his beloved Joseph, for over 22 years. He just can't pick himself up and leave the land of Eretz Yisrael. God himself comes to him and says, go down to Egypt. I will bring you back up to the land of Eretz Yisrael. And of course we know that Jacob was buried in Hebron in the Marat Machpelah. But it's such an unbelievable concept over here, that in spite of his feelings, he overcame everything just because of the fact that a Jew does not leave the land of Eretz Yisrael. And so we see that Jacob and the 70 souls go down to the land, and they settle in the land of Goshen. And things seem to be well, and they set up house over there, and they set up the businesses, and they reproduce, and they become Egyptians. More Egyptians than the Egyptians themselves in the golden land of Egypt at that time. And the last pasuk in our parsha teaches us the following. Vayishev Yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim. The Jews settled and they sat in the land of Egypt. Be'eretz Goshen. Ve'chazkuba. And they held on to it. V'yervu ma'or. And they multiplied greatly. An interesting pasuk which the Kli Kar, the commentary, picks up and says, well, how is this possible? Many, many years ago, a decree was sent out by God to Abraham that your children would be gerim. There would be temporary residence. And here the Jews have turned that temporary residency into a permanent dwelling place. And they take hold of Egypt. They're holding on to it. They are now more Egyptian than the Egyptians themselves. And they're building houses there. And they forget about the land of Eretz Yisrael. And the Kli Yakar teaches us that this sentence is a rebuke against the Jewish people. Because in a place where they should have been living on the mizvadot, the bags, in order to head back home, to have everything packed and ready to go when word was given that they could come back home to Eretz Yisrael, they forgot about that. They're good in Egypt. And they went to the circuses there. They became more Egyptian than the Egyptians themselves. And the more they tried, obviously, to become Egyptians, the more the Egyptians themselves turned and hated them. And this is a story that has just not followed us in Egypt, but it is a story that follows us throughout the entire generations of the Jewish people, my beloved brothers and sisters out there. That's right. So much so that the pasuk tells us that when the Jews left Egypt, biyad chazakah, God had to take them out with a strong hand. What does it mean by a strong hand, that God had to take them out? He's not talking about a strong hand, the miracles that he did against the Egyptians. No, a strong hand to take out the Jews. It was like pulling teeth out there because nobody wanted to head out. Nobody wanted to head home. Everybody was happy in old Egypt land. This is what we see throughout the generations, whether it was in Spain and Portugal, whether it was in Europe, in France, and England, and Germany, and the United States today. They just don't want to uproot themselves. They become embedded in the exiles, and that's why God tells us in the Talmud, one of the things that he regretted making was the galus, the exile, because the idea of exile is a punishment. The person is uplifted from his place and goes to a place that's outside of his own home. And so a person sees this as a punishment, but the Jews took it as a pleasure trip, the golden Medina. And this is the lesson that we learn in this week's parsha. Kubo, they held on to Egypt. They loved it there. Things were great. Things were great. God had to pull them out of Eretz, of the Eretz of Tumah, of the impure land, and to bring them back to Eretz Israel, because nobody wanted to come back. And this is what we still see in this very day. And that's a shame. That is a shame, because you got to be part of the process of the redemption that's happening today in the land of Eretz Israel. So the message, everybody out there, to all my brothers and sisters, don't follow in this plan that we've been doing for the last thousands of years. It's not working out. We're not supposed to be there. We're supposed to be in our own homeland, in the land of Eretz Israel. I'm Levi Chazan, and I'm coming to you from Jerusalem. And until next time,